Welcome to the regularly scheduled May 12th City of Port Orchard City Council meeting. So, if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. All right. First order of business is citizens' comments, and I have three folks signed up. Ms. Stansberry, you're first.
Hi, my name is Christine Stansberry, 720 Smith Street in Port Orchard. I'm the treasurer for the Sydney Museum and Arts Association and the Port Orchard Bay Street Association and the current chair of Explore Port Orchard. I'm here to speak to you regarding the lodging tax contracts currently in front of you for approval tonight. The LTAC process and the contracts have been much discussed in the past few years. It's our favorite topic, always. This last year seems smoother overall to me, so I was surprised when we didn't receive contracts by mid-February and were told late in March that there were some minor changes being made. Then late in April, we received the new LTAC contracts. There was no communication prior to that time concerning the substantive changes made, no explanation as to why these changes were necessary. After careful review of these contracts with the boards of each organization, I submitted our comments back to the city clerk and requested either a meeting to discuss or the use of the 2014 contracts. No attempt was made by the city attorney or the city clerk to address our comments or concerns. Instead, we were assured by city clerk Brandy Reinerson that the city, its insurer, and the attorney all agreed that the new contract was not the correct approach at this time, that we would use the 2014 LTAC contract as the base for 2015, and that we would have time to negotiate and discuss any changes before the start of the next cycle. Unfortunately, that is not the tone of the memo attached to your packet of information. I really wanted this to be a smooth process. We assumed that there must be some misunderstanding that could be rectified without having to come to council for intervention. We didn't want to come complaining about the new contract. We believed that we could have a rational discussion, explain our concerns, and come to an acceptable compromise. And we thought that was accomplished when we received the revised contracts. Since that is not the case, I think that it is important to take this opportunity on behalf of these organizations and provide the council with our concerns. Both the contracts sent to us by the city clerk and signed by each organization based on the 2014 language and the new LTAC contracts are in front of you for approval tonight. With the new contracts, we are particularly concerned with the scope, with the idea that we are somehow independent employees of the city working when and under the conditions specified by city representatives, with the loss of intellectual capital in that the work product would belong to the city, and with the insurance provisions, among other things. The insurance is particularly onerous when you consider that we're talking about being reimbursed for advertising or events that have already taken place and where we provided the city as part of the event application process any necessary insurance binders. Because we are not employed by the city and in every instance are doing work for other organizations, no one should be considered doing the business of the city. And with any advertising in particular, we're talking about sitting in front of a computer sending marketing and advertising out over the internet. We also feel that substantive changes of this kind should have been made as part of the application process, as given the conditions, we would have filed our applications differently or not at all. Since each organization is promoting its own events or marketing and advertising in an effort to bring people to Port Orchard, and we're not marketing at the behest of the city or under its direction, we believe that any risk in using the 2014 language for this year's contract is minimal. If the city was in fact employing an independent agency to market the city, then the new contract would be a good starting place. But instead, the nonprofits are being reimbursed for work done for their own organizations in accordance with the RCW in an attempt to bring visitors to Port Orchard. We ask that you approve the LTAC contracts based on the 2014 language and allow us to work through the concerns of the city for the next cycle of LTAC applications and before submissions for 2016 are due. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Next is Mr. Mahaney.
Good evening. My name is Alan Haney, 3213 Southeast Parakeet Lane, Port Orchard, Washington. Previous chairman for Port Orchard Fathoms of Fun, chairman for the Concerts by the Bay, float director, and Chocolate Festival in Port Orchard. I've been with this been doing volunteer work in the city of Port Orchard for various people since 1989. And when I saw this LTAX, new LTAX thing, I was a little appalled that someone wants to take my parade float from me and claim it as the city's. And all my signs and banners and all the work that I've done over the years and money I've spent supporting the city, bringing people to the city to make money for the city on a volunteer basis. And I probably have over a couple 100,000 hours doing that. I'd just like to say I think we ought to go with the 2014 LTAX. Give us time to come to an actual meeting and sit down and discuss like normal people and figure out what we really need. We are all volunteers. We volunteer our time. We pay, taxes to the city and stuff, but we're out here to raise money for the city and our businesses. So that's what I have to say, and I hope you consider let's do this right and take this LTAX thing, throw it to the side, and work on it after we get the 2014 contract made for the 15. And then in 2016, we present a contract that everybody agrees on that'll be fine for all people. I'm not an employee of the city. You couldn't afford me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Whittleton.
My name is Alyssa Whittleton. I just had one question about business item A on the agenda, and that is involving the interlocal agreement with KRCC. And my concern is that the cost seems to be open-ended at this time, and I understand our percentage is relatively small. But what I'm wondering is, could we put some kind of ceiling on that? Technically, it's not supposed to get out of control, but it just bothers me to think of signing into something that doesn't have a dollar amount ceiling. And I thought I would just offer that up before it gets decided on tonight. Thank you.
Let me take a stab at that. I believe the way it was explained to me that we're going to be paying the same amount as we paid last, as advertised, the small amount, and that when they finally figure out what the cost is going to be going forward, with a new ILA as we agree on, then it'll come back to the council.
That's not my understanding.
It's not your understanding?
Either.
Okay.
Go ahead, back.
Good.
Well, do we want to discuss it now, or do we want to discuss it when it's the business item?
Let's discuss it, the business.
Yeah,
item.
we probably should. Okay. So we'll try to get you that answer, because I definitely didn't get the right information there. So, okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. You were faster.
I'm faster. My name is Matt Murphy. I'm the Executive Director for the Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to also address the LTAC agreements that were recently sent out to us. I have a copy of the memorandum that you guys have also that wants to provide a short explanation of the major changes between our existing contract and the proposed new contract. So I went through, and I think there's a lot of these things, I think the attorney explained the changes well. I don't think she explained the effects that they have and the fact that they're not really necessary, or the fact that they're a burden to the organizations that are using the LTAC funds. First of all, it's a termination clause. The city can terminate at any time. By nature of the contract, the agreement, whatever you want to call it, we spend the funds, we get reimbursed for the funds. If the city goes and terminates at some point after we've expended funds, which we've already expended funds, I mean, unless the city wants to take possession of a whole boatload of planter baskets, that's money that's already been spent, that's waiting to be reimbursed for. The Chamber has, Explore Port Orchard has also expended funds. The disposition of property, non-expendable personal property, belongs to the city. In reality, as Mr. Mahaney pointed out, I do not think the city wants to own the float. I don't think it has the capacity to store the float or the banners that are purchased with these funds. According to that clause, they all revert back to the city. And if it's damaged, what if the wind damages the banner? Okay, according to this, the entity is responsible for replacing it. That clause just simply doesn't apply to us in this situation. A business license, requiring an entity to apply for a business license. In reality, at least one of the entities does not perform any business at all. In fact, it has no income to even buy that business license. It's a ridiculous requirement. The funds and accounting clause is designed to assist the city to determine that the contracting entity properly expended the funds. Well, in order for us to get reimbursed for the funds, we have to submit all the paperwork to you guys. All right? There's no need for this clause in that it's a simple reimbursement. The consideration clause, which I thought was my favorite, and I quote, "The proposed contract includes the most important element of a contract, consideration and the promise to perform." We are not getting any consideration. We receive zero income as a result of the LTAC funds. This is simply a reimbursement for funds that are expended on behalf of the city as spelled out in the scope of work and as spelled out in the proposals that we give to the LTAC committee with Mr. Chang and the committee has reviewed. Insurance, it's ridiculous, okay? The amount of insurance and the types of insurance required is unreasonable and often unnecessary. Washington State is what they consider a captive state. The workers' comp is provided for by the state and is required by the state. The occupational disease, the employer liability disease that is mentioned in the contract, that's for black lung. So now all of a sudden, all of our organizations have to get insurance to cover against occupational disease. That's a ridiculous requirement. And I could go on, but I'm flashing. So I do, and in the end, I want to point out, last month at the city meeting, the city approved the foot ferry service in what they called a funding agreement. All right, it is 2 pages long, used with LTAC funds. It's a 2-page long agreement to use the foot ferry back and forth, a very expensive piece of equipment with a lot of liability. There's no automobile insurance. There's no disease liability insurance required in this contract. It's 2 pages long. Ours is 14 pages. So I would urge you to reconsider, or at least to consider, the 2014 contract. And even going forward, let's give it some good thought before we move on. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Linda Simpson, and I actually live in Bremerton. So I have a very short letter and some papers I would like to submit onto the minutes. City of Port Orchard. In early 2014, we, a few friends and I, were asked to research the lodging tax disbursements and the Cedar Cove Association. This task encompassed review of the IRS 990 Easy Filings 2008 to 2012 from citizenaudit.org. They didn't have the filings for 13 and 14. A public records request from the City of Port Orchard, LTAC funds, and Cedar Cove Association. Information from the Secretary of State's office, the IRS, and the Attorney General's office. A formal complaint was filed with the SOS and the AGO. The AGO forwarded it to the Consumer Protection Division. The final report will be sent to the IRS, Form 13909, Tax Exempt Organization Complaint Referral Form, the AGO, SOS, and the City of Port Orchard. The copy of this report given to the City of Port Orchard is solely for the purpose of the city reviewing and determining whether lodging tax funds may have been used outside of the LTAC criteria. In no way is this to reflect on the gracious generosity of Debbie Maycomber supporting the event in 2009 or those in this community who gave their time for this event. Respectfully submitted, Linda Simpson. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody on this side had, yes, please.
Hello, Jerry Harmon. I know that I don't know an awful lot about the Puget Sound Regional Council and the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, but to me, it just seems like there are 2 more layers of government that have been added on to the city's responsibility, and now the KRCC is wanting to become more independent and have their own staff. And to me, that's just money that's coming out of the grants and the funds that would go to do the work on our roads and all of the federally funded projects that we're getting. And I just see more layers and layers of government being added, and I'm not sure that we're really getting a lot for our money. And I know that I'm probably on the wrong side of the fence on this again, but I really think you need to think about how the money is being spent, and are we really getting what the initial concept was? Let's work together and see if we can't get more, but it's costing us more and more to get more. Now, has anybody looked to see, is it worth it? Thank you.
May I address?
Yes.
Jerry, I'd like to address just a little bit of what you said, in that the KRCC, the local group, is funded completely by dues from its jurisdictions. It is not, no transportation dollars fund KRCC. It's strictly, so that money would not go to roads. And I would like to sit down with you. We could maybe schedule an appointment, and I could go over with you what PSRC does and what KRCC does, and the numbers we're talking about. That I was in a meeting just this morning that very much confirmed the importance of PSRC and being a member of KRCC to Port Orchard. So I'd love to sit down and speak with you about it.
Okay, anyone else? Last chance. Raise your hand. Okay, there will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. We'll move on to item 4, consent agenda.
What happened to item 3, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, approval of the agenda, sorry. Next.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to remove business items 7D through K from the agenda. Or we can take them one at a time, but I'm not going to support these contracts. And I'd like to replace the motion for all the recipients of LTAC that were approved earlier by the council to receive the funds under the 2014 guidelines.
Right, we can make that motion.
That's option 1.
Yeah.
It is an option for them. So
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote down your amendment to remove
Okay,
them.
thank you. Never mind.
Okay.
Withdraw your motion? I'll take my motion off.
Okay.
Okay, so we're still working
need all
on
the-
approval of the agenda, so you...
Okay, I'm fine.
Yes, Mr. Clausen.
Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as distributed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on then to the consent agenda.
Don't we need to vote on approving the agenda?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, it's been a long day. Okay, we'll be voting on approval of the agenda. All those in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda now. Yes, Mr. Patonsu.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. That motion carries. All right, we'll be moving on to item 5, presentation. And Mr. Vandewater, are you here tonight? Okay, Mr. Vandewater was hoping that he could be here, but he had some other conflicting business, so he didn't make it. But I told him that if he didn't, I would be proud to read his proclamation. Whereas World War II was a major event in the 20th century, and many of our servicemen and women gave their time and even their lives in the pursuit of maintaining this nation's freedom and the freedoms of the world, and whereas approximately 73 million deaths occurred worldwide during this conflict, with approximately 418,500 deaths attributed to the United States of America, and whereas Washington State lost approximately 3,950 of our good sons and daughters, and whereas these servicemen and women paid the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms of our nation and state, and whereas we are losing many of our veterans who suffered and gave their time and their and gave their time, and their generation is passing. And whereas we are their witnesses, and without witnesses, they just disappear. And I now, therefore, Timothy C. Mathis, Mayor of the City of Port Orchard, do hereby proclaim May 23rd through 25th, 2015, as the Spirit of 45, honoring our World War II veterans. In the City of Port Orchard, I call upon all employees, citizens of the City of Port Orchard to join me in this special observance. I signed this on the 12th day of May, 2015. I will see that it gets to the appropriate folks. I also wanted to say that there is going to be, on June 24th at 8 p.m. at Miller Woodlawn, there's going to be a memorial service. So we'll try to advertise that a little more as we get closer to that, but please put on your calendar June 24th, 8 p.m. Memorial or Miller Woodlawn Memorial Park. So that's our presentation. We have no public hearing scheduled for tonight. We'll move on to business item A, approval of interlocal agreement with Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council for countywide planning policies under the Growth Management Act. And Clerk Reinerson is sick tonight, so Deputy Clerk Fernandez, would you tell us about this one, please?
Thank you. Good evening. Mary McClure, Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council Executive Director, gave a presentation at the February 24th, 2015 Council meeting and requested the Council consider adopting the proposed interlocal agreement at that meeting. Council directed staff to place this item on the March 10th, 2015 agenda for further consideration. At the March 10th, 2015 Council meeting, Council had concerns that the budget and dues structure had not been formalized and asked that this item be brought to the April 14th, 2015 Council meeting to allow the KRCC Board to meet and finalize the budget. At the April 14th, 2015 Council meeting, concerns were addressed regarding the voting structure of KRCC, and staff was directed to continue this to the April 21st, 2015 Council Work Study Session for discussion and continue the motion to the May 12th, 2015 Council meeting for consideration. At the April 21st, 2015 Council meeting, Council discussed the City's position on the KRCC voting structure and dues formula, and staff was directed to send a letter to KRCC stating the Council's position. There is a current motion on the floor made by Councilmember Childs, seconded by Councilmember Cartwright, to approve an interlocal agreement authorizing the Mayor to execute an agreement among Kitsap County, the four Kitsap cities of Bremerton, Bainbridge Island, Port Orchard, and Poulsbo, and the Port of Bremerton to restructure the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council to provide a joint board for the purpose of collaborative decision-making with respect to land use, transportation, and other issues related to the countywide growth management. The KRCC Executive Board met May 5th, 2015, and Mayor Mathis and Councilmember Cartwright attended the meeting and can provide a summary of the meeting to the Council.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a motion on the floor, we can go into discussion, is that correct?
That's the way I understand it.
Okay, so I did attend the KRCC on May 5th. As we all know, we had a work study session where we provided KRCC with our unanimous position that the voting structure remain as is. The City of Bremerton at KRCC provided a motion to basically provide for voting structure that they were in favor of, which is contrary to what Port Orchard wanted and what Poulsbo wanted. That motion was ultimately struck down. I believe the final vote was 7-4. So the voting structure will remain as is, which was what this council had desired, and so that came out of that. Additionally, there was an RFP, RFP was approved to be put on the street to hire another contractor, much like Mary McClure, Ltd., to come in and replace Mary, hopefully in June timeframe, I believe, as she's announced her, I guess, resignation by that point in time. So I believe Mr. Gelder was going to put that on the street, and I don't have a status as of that right now, but those were the two big things. As a result of the KRCC vote, the City of Bremerton was going to have to make up their mind, and I have not received any word back, and I don't know if anybody else has, of whether or not they're going to continue on being a dues-paying member of KRCC or withdraw from KRCC. It would be my assumption that if they withdraw, from KRCC because they didn't get the voting structure that they wanted, and that's certainly their option. Then I guess we could expect that the appropriate percentages that were approved previously for our participation would increase to cover or not. I don't know. And that's the portion that I don't know at this point. And that's pretty much what I got out of the meeting. Beck, if you have more, please.
Before you go, what about the dues structure?
The dues structure has not changed. There had been conversation of changing the dues structure when Rob was on the agency review team last year. There was discussion of that, and that did not move forward. The jurisdictions preferred the current dues structure, and that is the structure is basically your dues are based 50% on your population and 50% on the assessed value of the property. And at our work study session, the council was provided with the budget of KRCC for the last 5 years, so you could see what the expenses had been. And then we also provided a breakdown of if we continued with the current budget for this year, our dues would stay exactly as they were. And then we showed 3 other options, and all of those were reasonable as far as dues is concerned. And what voting on this, the important thing that I want to say is voting on this interlocal agreement tonight is simply giving Port Orchard's approval for it. This cannot be put into effect by KRCC until it is approved by every jurisdiction within KRCC. So with that in mind, Kitsap County has already approved it, the City of Paulsbo has approved it, and the City of Bainbridge Island has approved it. The Port of Bremerton and the City of Bremerton have not approved it yet, and I don't know when it's back on their agenda. So to just take that a little further, the KRCC contract with McClure Consulting ended at the end of December of 2014. And she was, they negotiated an extension of that through June 30th of 2015 with a clause that it could be extended another 90 days. However, Ms. McClure let KRCC know the 1st of May that it is her intent to complete her obligation with KRCC as of June 30th. And so it became necessary for KRCC to establish leadership, and so they will be at this time hiring another consultant because the current ILA that we are working under does not allow for anything other than that. So the RFP is out. Proposals need to be submitted by June 1st, and we hope to have someone in place by the time Mary leaves. That may or may not happen, and we will have to go to a plan B until they're in place. But this, what this interlocal agreement does is it allows KRCC at some point, if they were to choose to hire their own employees or to continue with a consultant as they have for the last many years. It also establishes KRCC as a joint board, and it will function much the same as CENTCOM, and it would have an administering agency. All of the jurisdictions within KRCC were given an opportunity to submit a proposal to be the administering agency. Only 2 did that, and that was Kitsap County and the City of Paulsbo. We do not need an administering agency until such time as we do hire independent employees away from from going from a consultant. So by us acting on this, there really is nothing that is going to change in KRCC immediately. It will only provide that for the future if that's what KRCC wants to do.
Would you address the dues, the question from the audience about
Well, the dues aren't changing.
Right.
The
That's what I
budget
thought.
for this year is approximately $207,000 for KRCC. Obviously, we don't have a budget yet for 2016. We did look at what the budget would be if we had an administering agency, and that added about $50,000, but we do not know what the new contract is going to look like with the new consultants. But we believe it will be, well, it's up to us to negotiate that, but you can only negotiate with your revenue.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if Bremerton was to withdraw, it is not something that happens overnight. There's a process for that.
Yes, if Bremerton decided, if they did not want to continue with KRCC, and they withdrew, I think there's about a 6-month window that it takes
That's what
for
I
that to
recall,
happen. So it would not affect any dues this year, but it would potentially in 2016. And yeah.
So in answer to your question out there that it's an open-ended
It is not
amount of money, it's not. This body will have to authorize a different amount of money than we've
Each
already
year.
authorized. That's my understanding.
It's part of our budget process each year.
Right, so, yeah.
So, sorry, John, but if the budget is like 200,
And 7 this year.
207, and Bremerton's part of paying that, so and then they drop out, say, at some point, on a budget that's similar, our share of the pie is going to be quite
It will
a bit
go up.
bigger.
Yes, yes.
How much? If it was 207, they dropped out, would it go up like?
It's population driven.
It's population
The county
and-
still has the largest share. I mean,
Correct.
it will go up.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Just whatever it would double or what it would do.
To keep it in perspective, the county pays approximately $150,000 a year for KRCC, and the city of Port Orchard pays roughly $6,000.
Right.
And Bremerton plays about 23, I think, in that neighborhood.
So that 23 would be dispersed.
Correct.
Yeah, it'd be spread out over all the others. But it will change because we're changing the governance structure and.
No, we're not.
Well, the RFP could come
It's
back at more money or less money.
Or less money.
Yeah.
We're not changing the governance structure.
Right.
We're
Not at the
simply
moment.
getting a different consultant.
Right. So it's like any budget, we'll bring it back.
Right.
And this body will have to say, yes, we're willing to spend that on the process.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Clausen.
I'm not quite sure that's even correct. The way I read the agreement, the executive committee of KRCC establishes the budget, and then they notify us in September what our share of that budget is. So, I mean, our representatives will have a voice in adopting that budget for KRCC. We have 2 voices. And I'm not quite sure how that works. I know in the current voting structure, which we supported, requires 2 county commissioners and 2 cities to be in the affirmative for it to be approved. I asked the question, I'm a non-voting member from my position at Transit, and I was curious as to how the Port of Bremerton, they have a vote and whether or not they would be considered a city or not, and I was told that their vote does not count in that minimum requirement to pass an issue. And the second thing I wasn't quite sure of, and I didn't ask the question, I thought about it subsequent to that, but the city of Port Orchard has 2 votes. At the last meeting, the 2 votes were in opposite of each other. So does that basically negate Port Orchard's vote?
Not necessarily, because I have thought about that too, John, and it does not necessarily, because there are 12 votes at KRCC, so you need 7. So even if our votes are on opposite sides, one of our votes would count towards the 7.
Would it?
Yeah.
I didn't know if it needed to be this is, in quotes, the city's position, and therefore it would require, in our case, both members to vote the same.
That was one of our discussion points, if every jurisdiction had one vote, because then all of the actions would have to come to each city for a definitive position at the KRCC meetings.
I think it's also important to recognize that nothing in the change of the due structure or whether Bremerton and the Port stays in affects the geographic equity of the funding that will come in. So we may end up paying more dues, but we're also going to have a bigger pot because the competitive pot will have potentially one or two less participants. But we're not going to lose our 6.7% that comes in from PSRC.
I do have a question following up on what Mr. Dorsey said. So could we say that Bremerton would not be eligible for the pot that everyone else is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they won't be participating anymore.
You did say that, matter of fact.
Foolish.
You could say it, you did say it. Okay. Anyone else?
Well, I'll just answer Jerry's question a little bit. Statewide, there was approximately, the last funding cycle, $95 million that was federal dollars that were given out statewide. And of that, over 50% went to PSRC. And so we get roughly 7% of that money. And we would not come close to getting 7% of the remaining if we were doing this independently on competing statewide. So there are really a lot of advantages for us to be in PSRC and KRCC.
Okay. More discussion? Mr. Thompson? Anyone else? Are we ready to vote? All right. The motion, we read it. I don't think we need to read it again. Everybody's, unless you want me to? No? All those in favor of the motion made by Mr. Childs and seconded by Mr. Cartwright, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. That motion carries. All right. We're at 7B, approval of purchase of a utility trailer. And Mr. Dorsey, could you lead us into that one, please?
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. Given the recent loss of a public works vehicle, truck number 10, and already being down one vehicle, with additional vehicles reaching their useful life, the Public Works Department proposes the following remedy. Move Mike DeLine from truck 10 to truck number 1, which is our current water emergency vehicle that only has 12,000 miles, given the electrical tool and supply needs. Immediately replace truck 1 with a new 7 by 12 foot cargo trailer, and that will be used as our new water emergency vehicle at a cost of only $5,000. And as a note, when we looked at the replacement engine for the truck 10, that was $6,000. So it didn't make sense to do that just to have a truck sitting and not being used. Then internally, with some position changes, Tony Lang moves from his truck 26 to truck 40 as part of the McCormick position, and then our new meter reader will then move into Tony's truck 26. Dave Bolts has the new truck that was bought with the stormwater position, FTE, and then currently Dennis Muldrow's just bouncing between vehicles with the summer employees. And so in 2016, I will be proposing the purchase of 2 trucks, the one for parks and then the one for streets, so that we're back to even. But for immediate need, the Public Works Department developed a list of requirements and requested quotes from 3 trailer vendors for a 2015 7x12 cargo trailer. And again, that will be used as the new water emergency utility vehicle. And we had quotes from 3 different trailer companies, Olympic, Freeway, and Wells Cargo. And the Olympic bid of $4,858.88, including tax and fees, was the lowest bid. And staff did review all the quotes, and we turned up the Olympic truck and trailer quote of $4,858.88 was the lowest responsible quote. So staff recommends authorizing the purchase of a 2015 7x12 Cargo Mate cargo trailer in an amount not to exceed $4,858.88 from Olympic Truck and Trailer. And fiscally, the unexpected cost will be managed within the authority of the approved 2015 water utility budget.
Mr. Patonsu had his hand up, and then Mr. Clausen.
I move to authorize the purchase of a 2015 7x12 cargo mate trailer in the amount not to exceed $4,858.88, plus any applicable fees, miscellaneous fees from Olympic Trailer and Truck, Inc.
Second it.
Motion and a second. Discussion.
Good use of resources versus buying another truck to sit.
So, all right. The motion on the floor, move to authorize the purchase of cargo mate cargo trailer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Business item 7C, approval of public event application. And as I said, Brandy is home under the weather. So, Ms. Fernandez, could you read this into the record, please?
Lieutenant Cody Goodwin with South Kitsap Fire and Rescue and Region 2 Technical Rescue Team is requesting use of the city street and right-of-way on Thursday, May 21st, 2015, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Technical Rescue Team is comprised of members from the Kitsap Fire Departments as well as Clallam and Jefferson counties. The intention of this request is to provide a real-life, vertical venue to imitate a rescue. Their team specializes in these types of long, vertical-type rescues. They would like to block one westbound lane with fire engines on the Lund Avenue Bridge, and traffic will be diverted using traffic cones. City departments, the fire department, and Kitsap Transit have reviewed the applications and have submitted their recommendations and/or comments, and staff recommends approving the public event application.
All right. I noticed that we have a South Kitsap Fire and Rescue member here. Could you come up, introduce yourself? I wasn't sure there'd be a representative, but welcome.
Well, thank you. Hi, I'm Lieutenant Goodwin, Cody Goodwin. I was here merely to answer questions you may have about this event and answer any specifics.
I have one. You won't be using any interns on this.
Maybe one.
Yes. Couldn't you find any place that was more hazardous than that? That's the idea behind the training, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a perfect venue for what we hope to never have to do, but it's a perfect place for us to prepare for it.
All right. Well, if you just wait for a few minutes and see if there's any, when we get to discussion, or maybe a question for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. What's your pleasure? Yes, Mr. Clausen.
I was just going to make the motion. I move to approve the public event application from South Kitsap Fire and Rescue, allowing them to hold their event using city streets and right-of-way as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I will open the floor for discussions or questions.
Just
Yes.
one question. Was this the same type of training Bremerton was using at their downtown Marina Pump House today?
I don't know that.
They had ladders and everybody was on top of the platform, and they'd kind of closed off the cul-de-sac down there, and they're,
In Bremerton today?
Yeah, I was just curious if it's
no
an annual thing that all departments go through, or.
With the technical rescue team, we do monthly training.
Okay.
Depending on, there's 5 disciplines that we train for, this being one of them, being high-angle rescue. And I doubt that this was the same thing that we're intending to do. Okay. That may have been a City of Bremerton specific thing. This is a regional team event.
Does anybody rappel down there? Oh,
That's what we'll be doing.
Is that?
And back up.
Okay, Mr. Chang. I'm sorry, Mr. Chang, and then Mr. Childs. Go ahead.
Oh, Lieutenant, I was just, you talked about cones and you talked about fire engines. Are you saying the fire engines and fire trucks, ladders, whatever you have, are going to be positioned in such a way as to protect any vehicles from
We will be occupying
impacting the operation?
We will be positioning the apparatus to block one lane of traffic so that we have a safe work zone in front of it, as well as using those for our anchor points. And then we will be using a traffic diversion behind all of that to give plenty of advance warning for traffic and to minimize any impact on traffic flow.
Mr. Chang.
Can you describe the distance that you're going to be
Rappelling?
Roughly 200 feet.
Okay. And is it one or two people, or?
We'll have a team of, there's two separate teams that will be descending and ascending, and no more than 4 people at a time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, and thank you for your service, and thank you for your partnership with the City of Port Orchard.
Our pleasure.
It's a wonderful partnership, and it works for both of us. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, then we're going to be voting on the application for technical rescue training. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay? Thank you. That motion carries. Appreciate it. Okay, approval of a contract with Visit Kitsap. And actually, these are going to be all of the contracts, so we'll be discussing 7D, E, F, G, H.
All the way through K.
All the way through K. So,
As
what's
a-
your pleasure?
As a point of order, do we have to do them independently, or can we make one motion that encompasses all of the
Took the
LTAC
words
recipients?
right out of my mouth.
That's what I was trying to do earlier, but, so I would be supportive of that.
When we get to that motion,
Our attorney's here, and
You can do one motion.
you can do it in one motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if there's no changes to anything, that's probably okay. All right. What's your pleasure?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would certainly have a question of you and your administration. What are you recommending?
Well, don't get to vote on it.
I understand. I
It's
didn't ask
council
for a vote. I asked for a
decision.
recommendation.
It's a council decision, and it actually, I need to support the law and following the law, and so I would support the 15, even though I know it's problematic and I know it's against the will of a lot of the LTAC recipients, but I think we need to take advice of, you know. Does that answer your question? Yes, Ms. Lucarelli.
I move to approve the 2014 versions of all these contracts, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with, and all of the organizations that are listed in each, for services, lodging tax services, in the amount not to exceed the various amounts listed.
Okay, have a motion? Do we have a second? Open the floor for discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Clarification in your comment. Is it against the law, what we're proposing to do, or is it against the advice of the city's risk
Well,
manager?
I mean against the advice. It's not against the law.
Okay.
And it's, you know, it's the council's position to weigh those things and make that decision. So I stand corrected. It hasn't, it's not against the law. It's against recommendations. So, any other? Yes, Mr. Thompson.
I have a comment here. I agree with Ms. Stansberry's comment that this new contract process should have been part of the initial contract process that we went through at the end of last year. I see things in the new contract, in particular in relation to home harmless and some other things that could be part of our contract going forward. But this money should have been out in our community doing good work 60 days ago. And to delay this farther would be just irresponsible, in my opinion. I think this process was grossly mismanaged, and I intend to support us using last year's contract, even though it's not as good an agreement as we should have.
More comments? Any other? Yes, Mr. Clausen.
Well, I don't know if others received, but Chris, thank you for your email and kind of the chain of emails. And at one point, we actually told them, "Don't worry, we're going to use the 2014 agreement." And then all of a sudden, we're asking them to sign the 2015. So I agree with Mr. Patanzo. I think we could have handled it much, much better than we did.
I would just add that I think we can certainly move forward with better communication. As chairs of this committee, I was not aware of the changes to the next year's contract. I can only guess they were probably considered housekeeping, but based on the feedback, we found out that they were actually a little more stringent than we had perhaps intended. So I'm happy to support the 2014 contract as well.
Okay. And I'm just going to say I'm a little disappointed in seeing both versions tonight. We heard about this in economic development a month ago. And Beck had been approached, I believe, and I don't want to speak for you, so if I'm off base, set me up, but she raised many of the same concerns we heard today. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how she got to those concerns, but I heard them from her, 5 weeks ago. And I'm a little disappointed that both versions are in here. And it seems to me that with these concerns being raised at the previous meeting, certainly had several weeks to kind of get to a point where we're not here tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to clarify a little bit of what Mr. Cartwright said. At the Economic Development meeting, I believe it was in April, I believe I asked about the LTAC contracts and when they were going out. And at that point, we were told there were minor adjustments being made and that they would be professional services contract. And we all accepted that. And then when the contracts actually reached the nonprofits, yes, I did get phone calls and was given a copy of the new contract, and I happened to agree with the nonprofits that many of the things in there were onerous and that the applications submitted by the nonprofits would have been significantly different had they known what the rules were going to be prior to submitting the applications. And I most strongly recommended the city that the new contract be negotiated prior to asking for applications for 2016 so that everybody understands what the rules are before they actually ask for funds.
Yes, Mr. Clausen.
I guess I have a question. I wonder if it's not appropriate for the LTAC committee to deal with the 2016 agreement so that before applications are accepted, they understand what the conditions are going to be.
Yes, that's a good idea. I concur.
Okay, other comments? All right, we are going to vote on, let's see where we at.
Option 1.
Yeah, D
through K.
Okay. And we're going to be talking, we're going to be voting on the 2014 applications. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to offer a motion that we direct the LTAC committee for the 2016 season to develop the contractual agreement and have it ready prior to applications being accepted.
Okay. We have a motion and a second.
And I would like to make an
to
amendment to that the LTAC committee include the recipients in negotiating the contract and the agreement.
I certainly would hope they would, but
yes.
The motion on the floor is to direct the LTAC committee to have meetings with all the recipients.
Or include them in
include
the
them
discussion.
in the decision making, and then we have a. You're making an amendment to it.
I believe John's motion was to have the LTAC committee establish the contractual agreement for 2016 prior to asking for applications. And I amended that to include some of the recipients so they can actually negotiate the contract.
I'll second that motion that Beck made.
Or the amendment?
The amendment.
Okay. Seconded the amendment.
The amendment.
All right. Discussion on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion to amend is passed. Now we're on the Mr. Clausen's direct motion, or the main motion. Discussion. No discussion. We're on the main motion, Mr. Clausen's motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. That motion carries. Okay. We're at item 7L, approval of 5 easements with Mr. Tim Ryan Properties and Company. Mr. Dorsey, could you read this into the record, please, and explain it? Thank you.
Thank you. In 1996, Harrison Memorial Hospital, now the South Kitsap Medical Center, dedicated a 25-foot strip of property to the city. This strip borders the western edge of the medical center's property, as shown in Sketch A. The full strip is also shown on Exhibit A2 attached to the proposed easements. The statutory warranty deed conveying this 25-foot strip of property states that the property was conveyed to the city in consideration of maintenance obligation with regard to the sanitary sewer lift station and other benefits. Apparently there was an error in the legal description, and the medical center dedicated a longer strip of property to the city rather than what was originally intended. Again, see the Sketch A that's in orange. Tim Ryan Properties Incorporated now owns the medical center property, and in anticipation of a pending sale, a survey of the property was performed. The survey disclosed that a portion of the parking lot for the medical center was included in the city's 25-foot strip of property, and then that the medical center's vehicular access from Tremont Street was also over the city's 25-foot strip. In addition, during the Phase 2 construction of the medical center property, portions of the existing water, sanitary, sewer, and storm drainage facilities located within recorded easements were modified. These modifications resulted in the need to modify the existing easements. So that's the background. In summary, as the owner of the South Kitsap Medical Center property, Tim Ryan Properties Incorporated has asked that the city grant new easements over the city's 25-foot strip of property for the necessary parking and access, and to provide replacement easements for water, sanitary, sewer, and storm drainage facilities so that there is no impairment of the medical center's ability to fully utilize its property. Tim Ryan Properties is not offering any compensation for the access and parking easement based on the understanding that there was a mistake in the statutory warranty deed preparation, which conveyed the 25-foot strip to the city, and that more property was dedicated to the city than what was originally intended. The city will retain the 25-foot strip of property deeded in 1996. The utility easement modifications simply align the necessary easements to the currently constructed configuration of the water, sanitary, sewer, and storm drainage facilities. In exchange for the city's granting of these easements, Tim Ryan Properties, Inc. will pay for the city attorney's review fees as well as the recording fees associated with the easements. Staff recommends that, based on the background and summary information provided, that the City Council authorize the mayor to execute the attached easements for parking, access, water, sanitary, sewer, and storm drainage to allow the property owner full use of its property, provide updated utility easements, and still allow for the use of the 25-foot strip on the property if needed.
Okay, Ms. Lucarelli.
I move to authorize the mayor to execute the attached easements for parking, access, water, sanitary sewer, and storm drainage with Tim Ryan Properties, Inc. to allow the property owner full use of its property, provide updated utility easements, and still allow for the city use of the 25-foot strip of the property if needed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? Comments?
Question for Mr. Dorsey. Weren't you the engineer of record back in the day in the private sector?
Yes. The Harrison South Kitsap. The Harrison project is probably one of my favorite projects. I was not at this firm at that time in 1996. I had just left the firm. Had I been there,
this wouldn't have happened.
This wouldn't have happened. And in going back through the documents, I actually pulled my original design drawings, and once I saw it, I clearly saw what happened. And you can't really see it in that sketch, but as you go up on the right side of that yellow line, there's a heavy right-of-way looking line. That's a right-of-way line type, but it was used to separate, in the original construction, the Phase 1 MOB that Gao Landau Young built the building with, but RV Associates did the overall 17 acres. And so what happened was, because I wasn't there, somebody had gone up through this process, and I think it involved a previous council member to get access to their property, went up that line, which is the correct portion, but then somehow went up that line and followed this MOB line that had nothing to do with anything in the world, and it went through, you see where it skirts through the parking spaces, so that the nose into the parking space, about 7 feet of that, was suddenly deeded to the city, and it should have never happened. It was just somebody went up a line and made a mistake of following another line. So
thank you for the clarification. I know you do better work than that.
I would have not made that mistake.
Other discussion, other questions, other comments? All right, seeing none. Approval of 5 easements: access, parking, sanitary sewer, storm drainage, and water with Tim Ryan Properties. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? All right, thank you. Mr. Ryan is in the audience if you'd like to say a few words or not.
I would like to thank you. Sorry you got put on the spot. You have a gun, you know. But, again, I've been in business since 1957. And
could you come up? Could you?
Everything was just a handshake. And as time went on, we find out that a handshake was wonderful, but we probably have a few more dots to put on and so on. And everybody's in agreement on everything else, and then some funny thing like this comes up. But, it's neat that you can work it out, and everybody understands. So thank you very much.
Okay. All right, we're moving on to report of council committees. Mr. Clausen, Finance Committee. Okay, no report. And Economic Development and Tourism.
Yes, we met Monday, and the first item on our agenda was our event toolkit that we hope to have on the website soon.
It's there.
The RFP is there.
Okay.
And we did, we're at a point where we have the RFP so that we can get our event toolkit on our website, which will make it much easier for event organizers to plan their activities downtown. We also had a brief, limited discussion on our comp plan meetings, the 2 comp plan meetings, just kind of a follow-up discussion. And then we also had a report from the Community Development Department on the Mind Mixer software that we're using to gather survey information. That there has been some changes in the platform, and the learning curve is steep, and it's not necessarily going as smoothly as they had hoped. So they'll be working that out. And then we just spent a brief amount of time going over a map of the city and all of the potential developments that could be taking place. And that was our meeting. The other thing that I will say is on the second Monday of the month, we hold the public properties meeting at 8:30 and then the economic development meeting at 10. And what we're going to advertise in the future is that the meetings will be directly behind each other, because we had quite a gap between the 2 meetings this time. And so rather than advertising 8:30 and 10, we're just going to advertise both at 8:30, and we will do them one right after the other.
I believe that it was, the name of that outfit was changed to MySidewalk.com.
Yeah, and right, the Mind Mixer changed its name to My Sidewalk, and they changed their platform, and it's just not functioning
effectively at this point.
Effectively at this point, yeah. So they're working on it.
So is that your report?
That is my report.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Patonsu, Utilities Sewer Advisory.
Neither of those committees have met since our last council meeting. We do have our next utility committee meeting June 12th, and the next Sewer Advisory Committee, June 17th. I do have a quick question for Mr. Dorsey. I know you've been busy with paving. Or are we going to get City Hall painted this summer too? I thought we'd gotten that in a budget. And in your spare time, are you going to?
We're working on it.
Okay. So, and that'll be put out to bid then, I would assume. That's not something we're going to attempt to do ourselves.
That's the goal.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is that sewer advisory meeting location correct?
I think so. It's at the plant.
Is it? Okay.
I'll confirm.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll confirm that.
Because we just had one there. I was just wondering.
Yeah, I'll confirm that. I thought it was, but.
All right.
No, I've got it in my phone as the district office.
I thought so. Okay.
So we need to update that. Confirm it and update it.
We'll
but
confirm
I believe it's
it.
at the district office.
All right.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hey, Mr. Cartwright, Public Properties.
Thank you. We met on Monday at 8:30. Excuse me. Excuse me. We had a request from the United Methodist Church at Kitsap and Sydney to remove 2 general parking stalls and have them marked as accessibility parking only. We discussed some pros and cons of that and can really kind of see the need, but maybe not 7 days a week. So I think staff's going to go out and look at the grading and talk to the church to see if there's maybe another better place for their need, but maybe not right there. We received a request to have a residential parking permit for a trailer on Klein Street. It was unanimous that we weren't going to move that forward with a recommendation, so we gave that back to staff to let them know on that. Staff's going to remove a couple of trees that aren't thriving, and I'm not sure what street was that. Do you remember, Mark? Thank you. And staff prepared handout for A-board regulations and to give to the downstreet. Well, they'll be available for anybody in the city that wants to put A-boards out for their businesses, but they're going to especially give them to the Port Orchard Bay Street Association so they can get ramped up for their season. And we were also told that as far as furniture, dealing with benches and little dinette things or whatever out on there, they're working on that as well, and we should hopefully get that out soon so the merchants know what to expect as far as what they can put out in front of their stores. So hopefully the sandwich board stuff's going out, or if it hasn't gone out already, and then staff's still working on the furniture aspect of what's allowed out there, and it's going to be the same 4-foot easement and all that stuff, but hopefully we'll get it out soon, or they'll get it out soon. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chang.
Nothing to report on lodging tax, except I believe we're going to have a committee recommendation soon. I think there was very little input, maybe 1 or 2 council members. But the bigger question is how many hotels and motels will be interested in participating, because that sets the number of other members. So we are hoping for 4, but it may be less. And we'll find out soon.
Okay, thank you. Miss Lucarelli.
None to report tonight.
Nothing, okay. We have a work study scheduled for May 19th, 7 p.m. This building. Town hall meeting scheduled on July 16th, and a 125th city anniversary committee meeting on May 18th. So keep those meetings in mind. Let's see here. We'll go on to reports of department heads. Mr. Dorsey. Well, let's see. I have mine, don't I, in there? Yeah. I don't have a report, so we'll move on to department heads. Mr. Dorsey.
Yes, so you may have noticed some paint marks on Bethel. So we're moving ahead. The initial work that was supposed to start tomorrow probably will start next week. That's starting in the replacement of the 4 curb ramps at the intersection of Bethel and Lund to bring those up to ADA standard. That'll be day work, and it shouldn't be any sort of distraction. The actual in-traveled way work will commence, and that will be night work Sunday through Thursday, 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. I would like to think that things calm down at 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., but I don't think they do. So I think there's information on that. We met with transit and fire, police, all the agencies. And I think Chris Henry was going to put something in the paper and something in the POI. And we've going to put something on our website. And in general, just stay away from Bethel from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. Thank you.
Okay. City Attorney, Ms. Morse? No? Deputy City Clerk, Ms. Fernandez?
No report, thank you.
Okay. We're down to no executive session, so we're down to citizens' comments again. If you'd raise your hands, please.
I may not be fully clear on what constitutes a committee report, but I do understand some things transpired during the Finance Committee, part of which being the port in attendance regarding a cover for the platform. Is that not correct?
That was reported on last council meeting.
Oh, I see. I didn't understand. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
I just want to say thank you.
Anyone else? Change your mind. Last chance. All right. Seeing none. We'll stand adjourned.